helping raise up other women in STEM. And then she was kind enough to agree to participate in our event. So we're really excited to have her here and to hear her own experiences. And she's actually in the Chicago area, so she is the Director of Freshwater Research currently at the Shedd Aquarium. So if you're ever down there, maybe you can say hi. She has a diverse background in fisheries research, and she's worked in freshwater systems that range from the Arctic to the Amazon, and in marine ecosystems in the Bahamas as well. Now she oversees the staff of research and biologists engaged in freshwater biodiversity conservation and efforts that are focused in the Laurentian Great Lakes region. Murchie now maintains a research program focused on understanding how environmental change and human activists affect native migratory fish. Her aim is to undertake a research approach that embraces the complexity of the environment and the human dimension to further understand fisheries, leading to effective conservation and management strategies. Murchie has published in a number of peer-reviewed journals, but also enjoys sharing her research via popular press articles. Murchie received her PhD from Carleton University, where her dissertation focused on the physiological ecology and behavior of bonefish in tropical tidal flats. Her MS was obtained at the University of Waterloo, where her research examined young of the year yellow perch ecology at the northern fringe of their distribution. Before joining the Shedd, Murchie was an assistant professor at the College of the Bahamas. So we welcome you, Dr. Murchie. Thank you so much for being here, and we're excited to hear your experiences.
So now we will start with a workshop from Lee. So feel free to unmute you and share your presentation.
Thank you so much. Can you all hear me? Can you give me a thumbs up if you can hear me? That would be so helpful. It's so beautiful to see all of your faces, those of you who are sharing your camera, and for those of you who are sharing your names. If you haven't yet, I think it's lovely in the Zoom space. Just scroll through the Zoom and just take a look at everyone here, because this gathering is a really powerful energy of people. I am so honored to be here. Thank you so much. Foreigners and Colleen and Casey and Julia for having me, and for all of you. I've been hearing about the history of your organization, and I'm so in awe, and I'm like shaking a little bit, and here's why. You know, it's like really a big thing to hear your bio read out loud. Am I right? Like, are you with me on that? Have you had that experience? And feel free to share in the chat, like if you know, what comes up for you when you have your bio read out loud and you just have to sit there and listen to it and smile. Because it's really like the imposter syndrome can sort of begin the meeting. And so it's like quite an exercise in just being present. We're going to talk about all of that today. But I just want to, a couple things. So I'm Liz, and I'm here in Australia right now. So I am coming to you from the future, which I think is like the perfect place to talk about the imposter syndrome, because in the future, imposter syndrome for women is eradicated in my vision of the future. So I'm here in the future, and my husband is here working on a show. And so, but I'm a Northwestern grad. Thank you for telling me, foreigners, that Northwestern is proud of me. You know, sometimes I wonder if Northwestern is proud of me. I don't know if anyone else gets the like alumni magazines from their alma maters, and like we can have that imposter syndrome can come up there too. You know, you're like, is this school that I loved so much as proud of me as I love it? And we look at the big spread of some other amazing person and we're like, oh my gosh. So thank you. I'm so happy to know that Northwestern feels that way. And welcome to all of you who are from surrounding communities. It just feels like such a dynamic. I really believe that our future as women is at the intersection and is in cross-pollination. So I'm so committed to not just gathering with our peers and colleagues in our professional spaces, but like getting women from different professional spaces together. That really lights me up. So you're here. And the other thing I want to say, it's nighttime for you. You, just by showing up, let's just affirm that there's going to be some shifts and transformations for you around whatever brought you here today. So you don't have to work hard. Like you were working hard all day. So just allow yourself, like we're going to do some inquiry, and I'm going to talk to you a bit, but just let, you know, let things wash over you instead of feeling like you have to actively take notes or sort of work hard through the presentation. And I'm happy to send anyone slides. I have a little link where you can give me your email, and I'm happy to give you the slides if you want later. But I want to honor whatever got you here to this webinar today. So I'm actually curious, and I would love to hear in the chat, what do you hope to learn in this webinar? What brought you here? I want to honor the voice that got you here, because that's a really important voice. We're going to talk more about it. But tell me in the chat, like, why are you interested in this topic? And as you do that, I am going to share my screen, and Joanne says she can hear me. Thank you for telling me that. That is super helpful. I just also want to honor, I'm here in Australia. I'm living and working right now on the land of the Gadigal people, and they belong to the Eora Nation, and this is traditional Aboriginal land, and it's unceded land. So I'm here in respect to all the elders of this community, past and present. I'm going to share my screen as you share in the chat. Sharing your screen is always a sweaty moment for me. Let me know if it also is for you. I'm just always afraid I'm going to show you like the windows open on my computer that I never know. Like, I always make sure that the windows are closed. Okay, tell me if y'all can see this. Okay, great. All right, and then I'm going to pull up the chat so I can also see what you all are writing. Okay, here we go. Yeah, thank you for sharing. So yeah, Dawn recently learned that imposter syndrome is a thing. Yeah, like really resonated, Colleen, with what you were saying about so much of the way this shows up are things that we didn't even know there was a name for it. And also it can be a thing I've learned in my work with so many women, is that we think it's sort of only happening to us, and it can feel like this really private experience. So just by showing up, just by sharing in the chat, like we're already sort of busting through the grip of this. Okay, 5S says, because I am done with people telling me I am not enough. Yes. If I want to pursue scientific writing, I want to pursue it. Yes, trying to attain some tools to combat it while finishing my PhD. Interesting to note how many words that are sort of stem from war and violence come up around imposter syndrome. Like a lot of the words that come up around it are combat and battling. And we'll talk more about where that comes from, but it really, it's a reminder to me that this comes from a really patriarchal, a masculine energy of the way our world has been built. And that's why we use words like battle and combat when it comes up. Okay, so yeah, I'm about to defend my master's thesis and I feel like I know absolutely nothing. You know what's funny, Cheyenne, and let me know if I'm saying that right. I often feel like when the more I grow in my field and work, the less I know. So even though I am growing in my body of work, the things that I know I feel like I have more questions than answers. And I think that's something we're really working to flip, that like, moving beyond imposter syndrome does not mean having all of the answers. That's a myth that we are given to about it. Feels like it can never go away, says Rachel. That is so real. So yeah, I was talking to my father-in-law the other day, and he tells this story about my husband and his sister. And he says they were both like, you know, sort of around the same age, like 5 or 6. And my husband went to kindergarten and liked a girl and came home to his dad and said, "Dad, I really like this girl and she doesn't like me. What's wrong with her?" And his sister went to school and came home and said, "Dad, I really like this boy. He doesn't like me. What's wrong with me?" And that, and let me know if that resonates with you. You know, when I married my husband, I sort of, it was the most intimate I had ever become with somebody who just truly didn't know what it was like to sort of blame every situation on himself, or sort of to see all of the successes and failures in his life through the lens of his own worth. It was just his worth is automatic and implied. And it's like, what's wrong with that situation? Or what's wrong with that producer who doesn't want to give me the money I want to ask for? So I'm really here because that my whole life has really been a question of like, not that I want to be, you know, what's wrong with her? That's really a binary, and the binary is not going to help us so much there. But I want to know what it's like to move through the world and stop spending all of this energy. If an opportunity doesn't come, or it does come, I want to stop saying what's wrong with me. I think that is a question that women are taught to ask. We're taught to ask ourselves because our society is still running on us believing there's something wrong with us. And we still have a real structures that are built on us believing that we're broken or wrong, or that there's something to fix about us. So that's why I'm here. I'm going to start with a poem. And one thing I just want to say, don't direct message me because I won't be able to see it. So make sure when you're sharing in the chat, share with everyone. This is called Becoming. I am making something of my own, she said. It can't be too bold, said her father. It can't get too loud, said her mother. It's only good if people like it, said the internet. It has to follow this formula, said the expert. It needs to look like everyone else, said her 17-year-old self. It shouldn't get too angry, said the patriarchy. It better not fail, said the voice inside of her head. But something from deep within was rumbling, arising through her chest, bypassing the usual clamp in her throat that said no. She knew the only thing that would save her is letting go what had been held too tight for too long. It didn't take the advice. It didn't follow the rules. It didn't look like anything she had ever known. Finally, she said, I hear my own voice. I'm also here today because I imagine that there's something, some creation, some work, some message, some opportunity, some leadership role, some space you are meant to take up that you have not yet given yourself permission to go for, take up, do, launch, send out into the world. And all of those things, those works, the creations inside of you, I really believe like our future will be shaped by them. So I'm here in honor of those things. And my hope is that as we talk, you're going to receive something that you need to just get you to the next step of whatever that is, like releasing the thing or writing the thing or going for the thing or asking for the mentorship. And we'll check back in at the end and see what comes out. But I just want to remind you, I'm not an expert. I actually don't believe in experts. I'm a deeply curious person who has worked through this imposter syndrome my entire career. It only kind of continues to surface every time the career grows. So you're totally right, Colleen. It comes at transitions. It comes at big leap moments. And I started working with women almost explicitly about 5 years ago as the 2016 election really woke me up to a lot of things, and my mission got even clearer. And I started to realize that every woman I know was dealing with this. So what women will often say to me is, I have this thing, I have this awful imposter syndrome. It's this thing about me that I hold, that I carry everywhere. And it almost feels like this secret or this thing about me that makes me individual or is sort of this my own thing that I deal with. And after conversation after conversation after conversation, I started to hear this over and over. And let me know, like if you hear this from your colleagues a lot, we have to pay attention when we are all experiencing the same thing. And when I started to realize that all women were experiencing this thing, I started to get really angry. And I started to get really curious. And so I want to share with you today the context that helped me start to orient differently around this. I want to share 3 antidotes. I want to share what I believe the opposite of imposter syndrome is. And then we'll talk about the future and we'll do some questions. So save your questions, but if you have them as you go, I won't be able to read everything in the chat, but I will keep, I'll keep checking back in. All right, that's what we're doing. Okay. Yeah, so Julia says, I would love to learn how to eradicate it, LOL. Yeah, LOL, but like, why not? Why don't we eradicate it? So my vision, it's a big one, is that in 50 years, we're not doing webinars about imposter syndrome. That we as women leaders have moved on to other problems. Sarah Hagee, who's an author, says, Lord, grant me the confidence of a mediocre white man. That's like my husband, right? He's like, just, it's his culture taught him that he doesn't have to question his own worth, and trust to him with himself is implied. Elizabeth Lesser, who's an author of a really powerful book called Cassandra Speaks, if you don't know it, it's gonna give context for all of this, but she says, women know something that the world needs now. We know it in our bones. We've always known it. Women carry within us a certain way of being, thinking, feeling, and leading, long denied its validity and power, and now urgently needed. And let me know if in the chat if you're with us, if you're with me and Elizabeth on this. This is an operating principle of my life, and I really believe all of you have a unique contribution to bring to your field that is the next step of evolution. That's why we do this work, because it's tough. And I wish I had a magic formula for you. Like, you know, everybody in my self-help industry loves to give like the magic 3 tips to conquering your imposter syndrome. But the thing is, it's deep work. It's deep work, and it's deep shedding of narratives that no longer belong to us, and a reimagining and a rewriting. So thanks for being brave here. Okay, this is me. And here's why I wanted to share this with you. So I started out my career as an actor, and I also, a dancer first, and an actor and a director. And the common thread in all of the first 10 years of my career is that every single room I was in, I thought it was a mistake that I got there. And I thought that I just didn't trust the people that hired me. I thought I was waiting the entire time for them to find out that I wasn't qualified to be there. And as I transitioned into teaching and coaching and writing and speaking, I thought, oh, thank God, I'm making a career transition. That was just a thing of the entertainment industry. I will no longer be having to deal with this feeling. And it only intensified. And let me know if that has happened for you, of like, oh, I thought I could just shove it in a drawer over there, and then it just kind of comes back. And I actually feel this experience when I lead groups of women. I really worked through it a lot now, which is awesome. But especially at the beginning, I actually had a feeling in my bones that someone would come through the door and break through, and like I would get caught by like whatever, some police or kind of anti-feminist force in my head that I had created, because I thought I was literally doing the wrong thing by gathering women and reminding them of their inherent power. Of course, I realize how ridiculous it is, but it's in my bones. It's in our nervous systems. It's been passed down through many generations, because this is the experience of women in the world. So why am I sharing my little one with you? I was a super shy kid. Let me know if you, like all my shy sisters. I was really shy in my schooling, and so I thought for many years, like that was me, that I'm just like a really shy person. But when I got really curious about who I was before I started schooling, I realized that I wasn't shy at all. I actually had, I had this alter ego as a kid I named myself a different name, and her name was Sally, and she was a CEO, and she was just a total badass. And it's really interesting that energy as a kid is the thing that I'm really remembering about those early years. And then school, sort of something about school and various other things going on in our lives, all the little t and big T traumas can shut that down. But this energy, this original energy, I call it like our original spark. It is in all of us, and I believe it's more powerful than this imposter experience. So I want to invoke your original sparks just right off the bat right now. I think of it like this secret energy that we can start to draw from. Colleen says, I also believe that everyone belongs and has a unique contribution to offer. Yes, I think we all do. So, and let me know if this comes up for you. Something I notice a lot, we are so against imposter syndrome for everyone but ourselves. So a trend I've noticed in a lot of my women clients is you are like advocating for your peers. You are advocating for your students. You are reminding everyone of their power and championing them and encouraging them. And then in the privacy of your own space, when you are like on your laptop working by yourself and in your own kind of moments, you're treating yourself the way you would sort of be anti those women be treated. Let me know if that happens to you. That is, Christina says it's totally easier to cheer on my peers than myself. Yeah, so like our women power is easier everywhere, every space. It's easier than within our own hearts. And this is where I believe the next wave of feminism is inside the woman's being and body. So we have to start being an outer feminist and an inner feminist. Carolyn says, oh, absolutely. I can understand that imposter syndrome plagues women in the sciences and try to advocate for them, but then I still feel like I don't belong here. Okay, yes, Carolyn, me too. Let's talk about what shifted for me. And it's helpful to think about all of these celebrated women in history. This is Maya Angelou. I've written 11 books, but each time I think, uh-oh, they're gonna find out now. I've run a game on everybody and they're gonna find me out. And you could go on the internet and find, it's almost like every woman leader we respect has taught, has experienced this in some way. Let's talk about how it shows up. And just as I share this list, see where this is intersecting with you. We really want to get clear. The clearer and more truthful we can get about where it's showing up, the more power we can have about transforming it. Here, I'll share, I just want to share who, so doctors Pauline R. Clance and Susan A. Ames were the first doctors who observed this, and they called it the imposter phenomenon. And it's often also called the imposter experience, which makes more sense to me because I really think it is this group of experiences. It is not just sort of the typical feeling of being a fraud. It's a huge group of experiences. And that's also why they called it the phenomenon. They didn't like the word syndrome. They also didn't want us to be calling something about ourselves a syndrome, and that got added later. So here are some of the ways that it can show up. Self-doubt, perfectionism, unworthiness, comparison, this feeling of feeling simultaneously like I'm too much and also not enough at the same time, which I would say is sort of the way society teaches us to be a woman in the world. Hiding and holding back, engineering smallness. This is a term from Brene Brown. Engineering smallness means I'm not going to go for that big thing because I am afraid of what's going to happen. So I'm going to go for the small thing. I'm going to sort of work hard to have my voice not shared. Procrastination is a huge symptom of the imposter experience that we don't talk about enough. And usually we blame procrastination on ourselves and on not having willpower. But I really think that at the root of some of these procrastination symptoms are actually some of these cultural messages. Self-sabotage, excessive learning and training. So this is like, I'm going to read another book. I'm going to take another course. I'm going to find more and more and more ways to keep learning and training. I am a lifelong learner. I'm obsessed with learning. This is not kind of, putting down learning, but we can notice when I'm actually staying in the comfortable space of learning instead of the uncomfortable space of starting to put my work out there or starting to stand behind my work or my words. Under-earning is a symptom of the imposter experience. An inability to be present because it's so loud. So it can feel like maybe you're giving a presentation and you actually don't even remember the presentation you gave. Have you ever had that experience? It's like a disembodied experience. You don't remember because that narrative is so loud. Over preparedness, that's a big one for me. Under preparedness. And the last one, going it alone or not asking for help. So take a moment and just, if you feel comfortable sharing in the chat, share how this shows up most regularly for you. And I just want to remind you, anytime you share in these contexts, you are giving someone else permission to feel something that they are feeling and maybe are afraid to share about or afraid to talk about. So this is how we grow together, is we start to just get honest about what's actually going on. I'm going to take a minute in the chat. And Rashmi, I see that you have a question about how do we balance overcoming imposter syndrome with overconfidence? If someone says that we think too highly of ourselves, it's hard to know how much to believe that vs what we think of ourselves. Yeah, I always want to say, like, check your sources. Like, who's telling you you're thinking too highly of yourself? And is that a source that we actually want to trust? And then we'll talk about confidence in a minute. So hold that question. Yeah, so Farners is just reiterating, like, more imposter syndrome as our career grows. Absolutely. Okay, so people are sharing. Yeah, Michelle, you've also blacked out during talk sometimes. Yeah. So let me tell you the shift that happened for me. I've already been alluding to it. Okay, so I read this quote. This is from an article. Christine Liu is also in the field of science, I believe. Treating imposter syndrome as if it blossoms only in the recesses of the mind, we absolve ourselves of addressing the sexism, racism, and culture of overwork that may be causing the imposter experience. Imposter syndrome is not necessarily a disease of the mind, but perhaps a disease of the system. This stopped me in my tracks. This was sort of like a moment of like, because I had been thinking it was this thing that's wrong with me and this sort of individual problem that we have to solve. I had to sort of individually solve it for each client and individually solve it for myself. And when I started to put it in the context of our culture and our cultural system, it is rooted in a culture that is a colonialist, misogynist, culture that really runs on overwork. And so many of the symptoms of imposter syndrome are related to white supremacy. So when we start to put this in the context, we can start to understand that this is coming to us because of the culture that we were raised in. This is not a personal fault. This is not an individual problem to solve. We're going to talk about how to move through it because we're going to be the generation that's going to move through it. I really believe it. And then in 50 years, they're having a webinar about something else. But the first step is distancing yourself from this syndrome and naming it as a symptom of our culture and not as a personal symptom. So that's really the first antidote. So I'm going to talk about 3 antidotes. And this is rewriting the story. So when you start to experience imposter syndrome, the flip I want you to start making is naming it as a cultural phenomenon and not an individual phenomenon. And this is from a culture that truly is running. This culture is running on us as women feeling that we are unworthy and broken and not enough, and our voices are less important than the voices of white cis men. So of course we might struggle with putting our work out there or being visible or procrastination, right? So many of the time I think some women have issues with follow through. You have been taught by the culture that you are more important as a responder than you are as a creator. What do I mean by that? Like, we're told as women, oh, somebody needs something, let me drop what I'm doing and I will go do that thing for you. As opposed to, no, let me finish, let me follow through on whatever thought I had. I mean, the same thing happens when women are interrupted. It's like you're interrupted in a sentence, you're interrupted in moments. So just notice where you might be saying things like, I'm such a procrastinator. I have such terrible imposter syndrome. I'm such a perfectionist. You're associating yourself with these diseases of the culture, and I want to challenge you to start to distance yourself from that. So what I believe the imposter syndrome, the opposite of it is really self-trust, is women trusting themselves. So we eradicate imposter syndrome by women trusting themselves. This is what I believe. And for many of us, we're sort of taught the last person to trust is ourselves. Let me get all of this feedback from somebody else, or let me go out and get my mom to tell me what she thinks, and my dad, and this person, and the internet, and then we'll either eclipse our own voice telling us what it thinks, or we'll go there last. And what I want to challenge you to do is start doing that first. So this is a radical practice, but should you have in the moment experience of imposter syndrome, the first thing I challenge you to do is to put your hand on your heart. You might even do this right now. It's totally radical, right? And you don't have to, or if you're feeling shy on camera, but you might even try putting your hand on your heart and just repeating either out loud or inside of your head, I trust myself. I trust myself in my work. And just notice what happens to your body, what happens to your nervous system. For many of us, we can say, I trust myself, and then the imposter syndrome comes up right away and is like, no, you don't. Or like, you're a fraud, or whatever its narrative is. Katerina, I see your question. I'm going to come back to it. Emma says, wow, I've never connected imposter syndrome with a lack of self-trust. That connects with me so much and totally feels like something I can and want to work on. Yes. It's interesting. We were chatting before the call about what's in your graduate training, what's not in your graduate training, what's given, the kind of curriculum of graduate and postdoc work. But I think of like my entire years of schooling, and I have lots of degrees. I never learned to trust myself. That was not part of the education. So how is it possible, right? And this is where the burnout comes. Another really awesome source on this, if you don't know the book Burnout, has anyone read Burnout? Emily and her sister, and I forget her name, Nagoski, the Nagoski sisters. But so much of the burnout comes from this energy that we are spending battling this inside of our heads. So so much of my desire to shift this is like the more we can start trusting ourselves, the more energy we have for our creative work. And our future, our world needs our creative work. Like, we've gotten far enough with the creative work of white cis men, and it's beautiful. And I'm not ever knocking them. It's just that we're really out of balance. Here's number 2. So this is really, Joanne says, I'm sorry, everyone who's been getting DMs. Oh, okay, great. Yeah, just send it to everyone. Listen for a new voice. So most of us, this comes up, the way I hear about it is it's an experience of a voice inside of my head. Does that resonate? And maybe you already have a name for it. I encourage everyone to name it. Naming it just gives it one step away from you. I call mine the tiny terrorist that lives inside of my head. People have called theirs unhelpful. And I know it feels like silly, but actually like the naming process helps you to start saying, that's not me. So this is the thing that I want you to start practicing is when you hear that narrative, chatter, 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 don't apply for the thing. You're too whatever enough. So our imposters usually have their favorite line of you're not blank enough, their favorite hits. We all have what's on our favorite hits, and it could be anything. You're too old, you're too young, you're too beautiful, you're not beautiful enough, you're too accomplished, you're not accomplished enough. I've heard it all. So when you start to hear that chatter, if you can give it a name, or you can just call it imposter syndrome. So this practice is something a lot of my clients use, something I have used a lot. And it is literally just turning on a timer for 2 minutes and saying, okay, okay, go. Just talk it out. Just write it out. What do you want to say about my thesis right now? Okay, tell me everything. Just write it for 2 minutes. Almost like a kid who wants something that you're not going to give them. Because the most important thing about imposter syndrome is that we don't do what it says. Because usually it says, hold back. Don't raise your hand. Don't finish that thing. You know, because if you finish that thing, you might have to then share that thing. Or if you finish that thing, you might be a failure. Or if you finish that thing, you might be successful. That fear is usually really equally potent for many people. So journal with imposter syndrome for 2 minutes. This is like disarming its power, because it has its power over us when we're really listening to it. But if we just let it come out, then it's like, okay, I can work with that. Sometimes people crumple up the paper. I encourage you to do anything you want to distance yourself from it. Okay, then. And this is where, you know, I may go off the deep end for you as like very woo-woo. But I had to invent another voice, because I was just clear that in my life, listening to this voice was not going to get me where I wanted to go in my life. Like it's not pleasant, and it makes me feel terrible. So I started to get playful, and I thought, what is truly like the most opposite I could think of? And I came up with this alter ego called the creator, goddess, warrior, queen. And I know that's ridiculous. And I know that we can feel that's ridiculous, but here's why I find this magic. And I even made a t-shirt. I added the voter part during the fall. I made a t-shirt because women were asking me for this t-shirt, and here's why. Because they need the reminder every single day, sometimes multiple times a day, that you are powerful. And like one of my clients said, she had this up on her wall, and her boyfriend was like, why do you have that there? And she was like, because I forget every 5 minutes, I forget that I'm powerful and sovereign, and that my creative work matters. So whatever you need to do, you don't have to use a creator, goddess, warrior, queen, but this has, it's been a playful way for a lot of people to explore another inner voice that is much more supportive, encouraging, and helpful and effective than the imposter syndrome. So let's just look at some of the examples of the way these narratives can shift. So if you start to listen to another inner voice, and you could call it, if you have a name for it, feel free to share. You could call it your inner champion. Some people just call it like Oprah. They just want to talk to the voice of Oprah inside of their head. What else have I heard? Like Yoda. Some people have like a Yoda, you know, some sort of inner mentor or guide. Imposter syndrome says, and this is by no means complete, but these are just some of the phrases that imposter syndrome really loves to dig in with us. You have to know how it will turn out. So this means, have you ever had the experience like, well, I can't publish that, or I can't put it out there if I don't know how it's going to go. Like I can't guarantee that people are going to like it, so I'm not going to release it. The creator, goddess, warrior, queen, from that place of creativity, she says, I wonder what will happen. Let's see, let's find out. Imposter syndrome says they're going to find out you don't know what you're doing. The creator, goddess, warrior, queen says, good, no one knows what they're doing. That's the jig, right? No one knows what they're doing. Imposter syndrome says you're not blank enough, right? Whatever our brand of experience, beautiful, accomplished, we all have our greatest hits tape. You're not blank enough. The creator, goddess, warrior, queen just says you're born for this. You wouldn't be having the call, whatever the call is for you. If you're called to expand a certain area of your work, or write about something, or or teach in a certain way, whatever your callings are, you wouldn't have them if they weren't for you. So people often feel like, well, am I born to do this, or do I have what it takes? You have what it takes if you have the ache inside of you that is calling you to do it. And the creator, goddess, warrior, queen knows this. Imposter syndrome says you're a failure. The creator, goddess, warrior, queen just says, no, this area needs some work, needs some attention. So it separates that sort of epic, dramatic, like, oh, this didn't work out, I am a failure, versus like, no, let's zero in on this. Yeah, this needs some more work, needs mastery, it needs excellence, it needs editing. Imposter syndrome says, why you? Creator, goddess, warrior, queen says, why not you? So I love it. I want it. Yeah, I love this. I have something like this posted on my refrigerator. You can't have enough anchors, I believe. Again, because this is an automatic narrative that's been engineered into us by the culture and really the way we are operating. So little reminders. I have clients who put reminders on their phone that are just like, I trust myself, or I am powerful, and it can feel a little fluffy or self-helpy, but we're writing a new story. And I want to remind you that any work you do on this in your own life, you're benefiting other women around you, because we are riffing off of, we are evolving off of the people that we are around. So it's really a radical act for you to, whatever it is, you don't have to use a creator, goddess, warrior, queen, use whoever it is. But when you start to listen to that voice of trust and encouragement within yourself, you are growing other women because they can feel that in you. Christina says the story we tell ourselves is powerful, right? So we have to tell a new story about this. And my story is the imposter syndrome belongs to the culture, and we're writing a new story. We just have to, we have to find a way to make power, women's personal, power they're going to use for good, not power over, but that true authentic power, really socially acceptable. And something that we talk about and we learn about. Okay, so here what I believe sort of like, I don't really work on confidence. Let me know, like, what have you tried around working through the imposter syndrome? Imagine if you're here, you've tried things and they haven't always worked. A lot of the advice we're given is like, be more confident, do power posing with your hands on your hips, brag, talk a lot about your accomplishments. I do believe women need to talk about their accomplishments, but that advice is really just like saying, let's be the confident version of what society has been. We have a version of confidence, but first of all, that's not authentic to us. It's not going to work for us as women. And also, that really hasn't been working. Like as somebody wrote about overconfidence, we're actually dealing with a lot of overconfidence right now in a lot of the male voices of power in our society. So I really look at like creativity and courage. The real root of the word confidence is trust, is the Latin confidere. So that's why I think, confidence, it's so hard. Like, you're going to wait forever for confidence. When do we ever really feel confident? But we can work on trust, and we can also work on creativity, courage, and community. So these are the three, harness the power of the 3 C's. These are really the places I recommend that you focus your energy. Why I believe creativity is such a revolutionary act, and creativity in whatever it is that you are working on, any kind of space where you are making your work. Again, it's because we've been told that our job is to respond, not create. So anytime you can find undistracted space for your work, and this means like no phones, no people getting in your way. And I really recommend people just start with 15 minutes, but just a space where your mind, your ideas are first. This is a revolutionary act. And this is where we can put our attention. The more you keep showing up for your genius, for your creative flow, the more you start to trust it. So it's like this really positive cycle with the self-trust. The second thing is working the courage muscle. So hold on. These are just the 3 C's: creativity, courage, and community. We're going to talk about community in a second. Okay, I made this little chart right before today. I always add slides in right at the last minute before any presentation. I don't know if anyone else does that. There is no way you're not going to experience, like, the imposter experience shows up when you are in a place of progress. It's in a place of risk. It comes to you. You wouldn't be experiencing it if you weren't daring yourself to go beyond what you've been doing. So it always comes up around new experiences, transitions, big, bold moves. And on the other side of it is everything that you want. So when we can know this, I think of it like almost like it's like I'm here at the beach and there's a the waves, like there's this section of the waves. I don't like the waves crashing. I get water up my nose. Like I much prefer to be out beyond in that sort of still place beyond the waves crashing. But to get there, to get to that beautiful still beyond, you have to move through the crashing waves. So you're going to have to move through what we've known as this experience of like, I'm a fraud. But the more we can just, it becomes almost like a meditation practice. Okay, here it comes. It's coming because I'm in a place of progress. So I'm reframing it as like, okay, this is the culture. And also it's coming because I'm daring to go beyond what I've been. And that's a threat to our culture. The more women grow, the more our culture's whole system, particularly women of color, the more our whole system is threatened. So that's why you're feeling it. So the more you can just know that, and then work that muscle, like work that courage muscle of doing the next brave thing anyway. You are part of eradicating this. You become that, you become a part of this change. Joanne likes, yeah, I can relate, get past the breaking waves, right? Because they only break for a certain amount of time in a certain period, and then you go beyond. I want to just talk about, I know we are about to be at time. I just want to talk about community for a second. You all are here in community. But I think of both like our communities with our colleagues and our peers, but also I create little communities of mentors in my head. So this idea of creating your personal board of directors, this has been something that's really helped me. And I blend both people that don't know they're my personal board of directors. So Brene Brown is on my personal board of directors, but also like a mentor of mine that knows she's on it. But it's really like, we are not doing this alone. And that imposter syndrome says you have to do it alone. So part of the way we battle that, we challenge that, is by saying, no, I am going to solicit the advice that I want to hear. So this has to be really specific. You don't put anyone on your personal board of directors who is not also invested in your rising. And so often we are listening to people who are not actually invested in our rising. So listening to people saying, I am going to actively seek out the advice of people who are invested in my evolution and my expansion. And put people on there like who you don't know yet. Put Michelle Obama on there and just ask her, like, Michelle Obama, what would you do here? Because we know what the imposter syndrome says. That's not going to work. We have to start replacing that narrative and borrowing from some of these people that we look up to can help us. That's how we sort of start to create that new story. Surrounding yourself with other women, talking about it together. Talking about it with distance. So who would you be? I really want you to just take a minute and either write this out or ask yourself, feel free to share in the chat. Like, if we could, harnessing our power together as a community of women, all of you here, all of you on the replay, if we could eradicate this experience, what would happen? What would be possible? Who would you be and what would you do? We have to source our imaginations, because we can't just tear something down. We have to build something new. So what would emerge in its place? Who would you be and what would you do if we were able to eradicate this from your experience? And take a minute, write about it, or feel free to share in the chat. When I asked women this, the 3 answers I heard were 1, free, 2, who I've always been, and 3, me, really me. I'd be free, who I've always been, me. Here's some of the things that I imagine. And just, we actually, like, our imaginations are shaping the world. So take a minute and just start to see this, right? Start to imagine this world where your peers aren't experiencing this, where you are not experiencing this, where your students aren't experiencing this, where your ancestors are feeling you not experiencing it, so then they're shifted as well. And where the women that are coming after you are not on this webinar, they're on a new problem to solve. So imagine a world where we no longer feel the need to hide or take a shower or apologize about our accomplishments. Imagine a world where sharing our creative contributions is as culturally appropriate as sharing our shortcomings. Imagine the works we will create, the speeches we will give, the solutions we will birth, and the nations we will lead when we reclaim the energy we have spent battling the imposter experience. What does it feel like for you to imagine that? I'm curious. Joanne says, I would have finished my PhD. Yeah, and so we can also just offer heaps of forgiveness around any of the things that have happened in the past as a result of this, right? The more we can approach ourselves with radical compassion. Oh, I see what she was up against in her whatever chapter of your life. I see what she was up against. She was up against the world teaching her that it's unsafe for women to use their voices or to go for something that they might not feel qualified for. I'm sure you've read all kinds of research suggest that women often do not apply for things they're actually qualified for or even overqualified for, where men have a much higher tendency of going for them, even if they're underqualified for it. So that's where we're going to start making a series of new decisions. Creator Goddess Warrior Queen says, what happens if you do? Why not? What happens? It's not, I know you're going to win or you're awesome. You know, it's not that sort of pumping yourself up. So the opposite of imposter syndrome is not excessive bragging. It's not, I'm amazing. It's just your work. It's just your voice. It's just your curiosity and your contributions. Lisa says, I would be more creative and take more risks without worrying what others might think. Casey says, I would spend more time enjoying when I succeed. Yes. So those moments where like the thing is happening, it's going well, and we can't even be in our bodies. We can't even feel good about it because we think it was a mistake. Not second guessing if I actually deserved it. I would share my success and share it with others. Yeah, Chrissy says, I like that. I see what she was up against. Yes. Can you offer that to your former selves? I see what she was up against. And I now know more. I'm more evolved, and I'm going to make some new choices. So I'm going to make some new history. And this is my wish for all of you, that you let your whole self be seen, heard, and known. That's on our generation. We weren't taught to do it, but we are part of the generation that is going to shift this for women. We're standing on the shoulders of many, many people who have paved the way. And now I really think we're the generation that's going to really change the conversation here. So I dare, I leave this with all of you. I dare you to do and think, maybe you can identify right now, maybe you've been thinking about it this whole time. What is it that you would do? What is one thing you would do, maybe in the next month, in honor of Women's History Month? One thing you would do that, if you could just sort of push that imposter syndrome to a side, what would you do? And do it. That's my dare to you. And just see what happens. And do it with support and love. So like call one of your friends, your peers up or in this community, and just be like, hey, I'm doing this thing. Can you send me some extra support? Because we have to go with support and love as we do it. Colleen, I would found a National Center for Women in STEM. Well, I'm going to green light that. Let's green light that for Colleen. Yeah, that takes a little longer than next week. But it's already in motion. Okay, I'm seeing questions. We have time for questions after the next speaker. So thank you all for sharing, for being here. We're going to do Q&A after, but I just wanted to share that I'm really committed to this conversation, and feel free to share your thoughts with me on Instagram. I'm best at DMs. Emails take a little longer, but if you send an email to hello@LizKimball, it'll get to me. And then if you'd like the resources, like the slides, and also I'll send you some of my favorite resources around this, some of the things that have helped me and my clients. You just go to that link, and I'll pop that in the chat in a minute. So if you just put your email there, we'll make sure you get all that in probably the next couple of days. So we're going to go to questions in a second, but I'd love to know in the chat as we transition, just what's resonating the most with you right now. And thank you.
Thank you, Liz. That was wonderful. And now we will allow Dr. Murshi that she explains us her expertise, her experience with imposter syndrome.
Great. Thank you so much. Can everybody hear me okay? Yep, great. Well, I'll echo the thanks to the organizers again for arranging this workshop. I've already learned a lot in the last hour as well. And I'm just appreciative of being invited to share my experiences with imposter syndrome. And actually, after getting the invite, I was like, yeah, I'm totally in for participating. And then I was like, oh geez, I've never actually talked about my experiences with imposter syndrome. I don't even know for sure if I know exactly all the ins and outs of what imposter syndrome is. So I thought, well, this was actually a good time to do a little bit of digging into imposter syndrome. And actually, it was kind of neat. At the beginning of February, NPR had put a podcast out on the topic and talked about calling it imposter phenomenon, because syndrome, it's not exactly syndrome in terms of the medical terminology, but it, I think, is a super timely topic, especially as we're in this pandemic right now too, because I think a lot of the things myself that I would do to try to quell these feelings that creep up, like, you know, talking to your support group, getting together with others, or even just things that help you manage your stress, or things that are a little bit more difficult to do right now amidst the pandemic. So I think it's really great that we're discussing this topic now, and I think it is something that just really resonates with a lot of people. As Casey had given my bio at the beginning, if anybody didn't catch it and joined in late, I'm Karen Murchie. I'm the Director of Freshwater Research at Shedd Aquarium. I came to this position in Chicago, well, started out as a research biologist at the aquarium in fall of 2016, became the Director of Freshwater Research in 2019. But prior to that, I was an assistant professor in the Bahamas. Prior to that, I had done my PhD research, and I had a gap between my PhD and my master's where I worked for the Canadian Federal Fisheries Agency. And then I moved up to the Arctic and worked as an environmental consultant for a bit. So that's a little bit about me. I've had some great adventures. I've moved around and stuff. But I've definitely navigated throughout my career these feelings of self-doubt and feeling, I guess, like an imposter. I am from a very small town in southern Ontario in Canada, small enough you'd maybe even call it a village. We have one stoplight. And I'm definitely, compared to some of my peers in that area when I grew up, I'm in a career that wasn't something that, you know, was really prevalent or something that I knew about as much. The first in my immediate family to attend university. So I remember, you know, going through high school, I was very comfortable there. You know, the entire high school had 400 students in it. So I felt very comfortable. And when I went off to undergrad, all of a sudden I was like, wow, there's like a whole lot of people here. You know, what am I doing in this environment? And, you know, even students that could take summer classes, and I had to work in the summer to be able to support my education. I was like, oh, you know, am I putting myself behind in my career? Do I belong here? Like, am I as prepared? Those were some things that I was feeling at that point. Definitely had support from my family all along, and feel very lucky to have had all those cheerleaders along the way. After I had decided originally too, I wanted to be an optometrist. And so when I was doing my undergrad, I was focused on my honors biology program to take, you know, all the electives that would get me into optometry school. But then even just in doing that career path, I started to not feel authentic to what I wanted to do. Everybody in undergrad and most of my peers at that time were really interested in careers in the medical field or biotech and stuff. And I was like, well, this isn't really for me. Actually, I like fish. I want to do fisheries. So having that opportunity to realize, you know, that's more the area I want to be in, and starting to get some mentors and friends in that arena was really helpful. Entering into the fisheries career is, you know, there's no question that it's a male-dominated field. It's definitely changed a lot in the past 20 years since I've been in this field, but I think there are some moments too that can make you feel a little bit like an imposter in a field that isn't as diverse in the genders, but I think something that's been extremely helpful for me through my career is talking with other people who just generally also feel like there's times where they feel like they're an imposter, and it's not just something that is a unique experience to women. I think, you know, maybe it isn't as prevalent, but this is where I'm not an expert either, but I have colleagues as well that have definitely discussed, you know, questioning their skill sets and so on. So I think it's something to keep in mind, given that a lot of the people on the call and a lot of the chats that came up were talking about careers in science and graduate school in science, that this is something too that helped me a lot, is just having these frank discussions, being open, being genuine, and sharing feelings. And you start to find that there is a lot of commonalities in that experience. I think too, as scientists, because one of the biggest areas where we're evaluated is publications, and number of publications is just like one of those things where it's like there's always going to be people that have so many more publications than you, and you'll have more publications than others, but it's a tricky one because it's also a metric that we're evaluated in a lot too. So there is that pressure to publish, and in that publication process is another stepping stone, which can lead to imposter syndrome. It's like going through this peer-reviewed process where somebody's like critiquing your work, and you know, maybe we're used to going through that process, and I think that's something that because everybody has to go through it, males and females, whether you're an early career researcher, whether you're a senior scientist, the peer-reviewed publication process is not unique. So I think, again, just going through those experiences and learning how to defend your research and stuff and writing those things back has been helpful. So these are some of the things that you know, I've experienced in my career. I think somebody was asking, does it change with age? I'm not sure whether I've experienced an increasing amount. I would say I definitely noticed that, yeah, it's with those big career changes, those big moves. I've moved between different countries or changed positions. It's sort of like, and even changing the roles, not just like staying in academia the whole time, but going from like a government position to environmental consulting, back to academia, and then to an NGO. It's like, you know, I just keep, my mom's like, why do you always have to make it so hard for yourself? She's like, you're always like challenging yourself. And, but it's like it's something I strive for. I'm like always curious as well. And, but it definitely doesn't come without like, you know, asking yourself a lot of questions or putting yourself in this situation where imposter syndrome can creep up. But I think some of the things that Liz discussed as ways to mitigate it are really helpful. And yeah, even the opportunity to actually right now, you know, since starting the role as a director, I'm overseeing a team of a whole bunch of other PhD level professionals who, like, as far as their experience level school-wise, we've all got PhDs, and you know, that transition into this particular position, I'd say, was a little bit more jarring for me. Like, oh, like, do you really have the skill set to manage other PhD level scientists? So that was a time that came up for me. But again, just sort of taking that opportunity to look back at what are all the different things that you've done, Karen? Like, what are all the experiences? It's beyond just some of those basic ways we evaluate ourselves as scientists, like publications and how many people are citing your work. It's like working in different environments and working with different people and different communities. I think there's so much more, and I'm glad even just as scientists, we're looking at evaluating beyond just publishing papers. It's more now like, well, what other things are you doing with science communication? So I think those are all important aspects and some good changes in the field that I'm in. So I think a couple other things that I would say is just, yeah, being mindful when I start to have feelings that are like throwing me off productivity, like what's going on, and just taking that time to step back and go, like, what is this feeling I'm feeling? Where is it coming from? Should I ask for help, either to have somebody just bounce like what I'm feeling off of them, or do I just literally need help getting something else off my plate so I can focus on other things? I think those are all really helpful suggestions or things that I've done to help manage that. And then I think that there is just a real benefit in increasing our collaboration and just like working with other people and sort of navigating some of these challenges together. I think that is something that we're lucky in the science field. In a lot of ways, there's a lot of collaboration, and just realizing nobody is like truly an expert in everything. We all do bring different things to the table. And you know, you can see that too, even in things like field work and those collaborations. Nobody is good at everything or is like perfect at everything. We're all bringing something unique and making something work by the skills that we have. So I know we're getting close to the time for having some Q&A, but I'll also just say that right now I'm also getting to work with a lot of scientists from around the world that are solving some pretty big issues in terms of freshwater biodiversity, conservation, and freshwater fisheries. And there's like moments where I'm like absolutely in awe of the people that I'm working with. Like, how did I end up in this group? Like, how did I get so lucky to be people, you know, in this group, and do I belong here? And it's just having that opportunity to develop mentors and just, again, just reassuring yourself you're there because you deserve to be there. And it's also like what you make of that time, and sharing your experiences. So I think that's all I have, and I'd love to go through some of the chats here and see if we have any questions for both Liz and I.
Thank you, Karen, so much for explaining us like your career paths and how you deal with the imposter syndrome. So now, if someone has questions, just feel free to unmute or add it in the chat, and we can start with this question and answers session.
And while that's happening, I'd love to hear what you think, Karen. Katerina wrote earlier in the chat something about you feel that you were really supported by your family, by society, by your advisors, and yet this still comes up to you, comes up for you. And you're just so not alone with that. I have heard that from a lot of people. It's almost like, how do I have this thing? Like, I should be feeling great because everyone's telling me, you know, and supporting me. So what I just want to say about that is the cultural narratives are so pervasive, and they are subliminal, and they're often in our subconscious. So I really do recommend this book, Cassandra Speaks, because it really just traces back these narratives around imposter syndrome and self-doubt to the earliest form of storytelling in our culture. So the Adam and Eve myth and the Greek mythology, and these stories have been handed down, and then we see them in movie, you know, they're replicated in the cultural stories that we all absorb. So even if everyone around you was supporting you in that way, you are still a product of the storytelling told by men, stories about women, and that women who have been taught to doubt themselves through these stories. So that's what I want to say to that. And it's really natural. I hear that a lot. I don't know if you have anything on that, Karen.
Yeah, I guess it's always just hard to know because your experiences are your experiences, and it's just, even if somebody else like tells you that they are going through the same thing, I think it's still hard to sometimes relate or just understand that, yeah, it's something that a lot of people feel, but yeah, it's interesting. I think too, we don't have these types of workshops usually in graduate school or anything. So I think this is something that is really helpful. I think grad school is a particularly important time for this topic because it is at the launch of like your next step, whether it is, you know, another degree if you're finishing your master's and deciding to go on to a PhD, or if you're looking for that big career. It's a scary time, and there's a lot of opportunity for that doubt to get in there.
Hi, can I ask one question?
Yeah.
Hi, Liz. It was a great talk, and thank you so much, Karen. I want to ask you one thing. Like, supposedly you are trying. Is this thing comes under imposter syndrome? Like, you are trying to progress, and deep down you know that you are doing good. Like I mentioned about scientific writing or something, but then your boss or someone or your great colleague comes into the picture and tells you, see, I think you think's really high of you, this is not meant for you. And then just a little bit oh, we think really good of you, and then that negative thing starts in, and then you think about oh really, I am really not that good enough. And another aspect of is that when your higher ups, when you're trying to make progress, they try to emotionally manipulate you. Specifically, I want to put it in a perspective. I don't know about other women, specifically with Asian women, or I don't know whether it's common throughout the world. They try to emotionally manipulate you when they cannot counteract you with your logical argument. Then they try to intimidate you. Then they try to emotionally manipulate you. So could you please elaborate your views on this thing? Thank you.
Yes. Will you tell me your name?
My name is Isha Sharma.
Isha, thanks
I'm
for
from
this question.
Northwestern. I'm from Chicago, Northwestern.
Go Cats.
Go Cats.
Thank you for this question. I just want to say, and then I'd love to hear what Karen has to say. Yes, this happens. And I'm sorry, first of all, I'm just sorry that happened to you and to anyone in this community who's experienced that regularly. I imagine everyone has experienced something like that at some point. And I actually keep a little list. I personally believe feedback, the more I can distance myself emotionally from feedback on either side, actually the stronger I grow, so that I'm actually really not associating with positive or negative feedback, because both of those can be a kind of head trip. But I do keep little lists because I think it'd be helpful. Just, when people say nice stuff, I just keep a list on my computer, and I encourage anyone to do that. It's just helpful to have that around on the tough days. But I also keep a list of all the people who said, you're not going to do it. Or I remember it's amazing. Like, I remember the grad school professor who said, you'll never be successful. I don't remember any of the other professors who were like, whatever the positive stuff. We really remember that one negative experience. I have a list of those too, because I can't wait to prove them wrong. And I just keep those around. There are so many people. Like my question for society is, why isn't everyone coming to this webinar? Why is it actually only women? I think it's your male colleagues and professors who actually need to be working on this even more than you.
Yeah, they need it more, I guess. They need it more, yeah.
It's a function of the system, not the individual. So I can't wait to, figure out how we're going to solve that all together. But that's their unprocessed trauma. I mean, that is their unprocessed racism and misogyny being taken out on you. I know that doesn't help. And as a woman of color, you are absolutely experiencing the brunt of that. And I'm so sorry. And I am just here as a white woman, like, to fight with every ounce of my being. But they're going to do that. Like, we have to know they're going to do that. And that is the way the culture has taught them to relate to women and to women of color. And until we get them in these workshops, like, we just have to keep proving them wrong.
Thank you, but it's an eye-opener conversation, and I'm glad that I joined it. It's really eye-opener. And the best thing I realized about the conversation that you told, the best point is that imposter syndromes comes into the picture when you are trying to progress. So that is a really good revelation.
I'm so happy to hear that. And we're not blaming, right? Like, it doesn't help to blame society. It just happens to know that's where it comes from. And it comes up when I am moving myself and everyone forward.
Thank you, Liz. Thank you.
Yeah.
Let's connect more and more, and let's, just eradicate this thing from the society. Let's see. Yeah.
I just want to add like a personal experience, because now that Liz, you said like you also keep like the bad comments. I had like a similar experience, like when I was doing my PhD, I have a guy in my lab that he was like thinking, I'm the best, like you cannot do it. And for me, sometimes it's like a fool. Like, I'm doing something, I think, oh, I remember that guy said like, now I can demonstrate that I can do it. And I realized like, he didn't say me, no, you cannot do it. And now it's like, okay, this guy told me I cannot, then I will do it and I will prove that I'm good as you. So I think it's a very good strategy to keep also these negative comments in your mind, but just like for a positive input for you.
I mean, I can remember some negative things that I've heard throughout my career, and I don't have them written in a list because I feel like the few that I remember, they're there, and sometimes they're there, unfortunately, as like a little nagging voice. But some of the things too that I had heard, even like early on in elementary school, just, oh, you're not good at math, you're like stupid at math or something, like absolutely unfounded and ridiculous. But at that time too, particularly like as a very young student, that didn't make me feel good. And I remember when I was in university and completed like first year calculus at the University of Waterloo, I was like, oh, I'd love to show this to my teacher. Yeah, I mean, I think it is absolutely crappy, no matter who you are and where you are in your career, when you're trying to accomplish something and people start putting doubts or questioning you or trying to hold you back. I think this is where we really do have to rely on a network of colleagues, not necessarily just in your lab or broader, to speak of these feelings and just help to cheer each other on. But we also have to be able to cheer ourselves on from within and be able, you can have a bunch of people telling you, you can do it, but you have to learn how to believe it for yourself and advocate for yourself. And you deserve it. You deserve to move forward. You deserve to experience those things. You deserve to unlock your full potential. I know there's another question in the chat with Corrine said, both of you have pursued higher degrees and somewhat pigeonholed yourselves in a way into a small area of very developed skills, and then you've shifted into a related but new field, i.e. film to life coaching, academia to consulting. What did you find was the best way to motivate yourself to navigate new waters you found yourself in? And what was the biggest thing you learned from venturing into new territory? I'll add something, and then Liz, if you want to add your experiences. Yeah, I mean, I think there's things like across, even though I've changed like the different, you know, from academia to NGO to consulting and all that, you know, the thread of fisheries is consistent across, so it's not like a complete reinvention by any means. But I think in each time just sort of challenging myself to, I guess, yeah, embrace a new environment, new people, new ways of thinking. It's scary, but it's also extremely exciting. I really do get a lot from learning from others, and I really harness that nervous energy, I guess, to putting myself in an unfamiliar situation, because that's such a good way to learn. And I guess too, I've grown the confidence to be able to put myself in those situations by changing something very dramatically about the country, the workplace, etc. that I'm living in. And it's not easy always, but it's just truly helped me grow. Liz, do you have anything?
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I mean, I love that. I wish I would say that I was like embracing the change in those moments. I would say, honestly, for me personally, my career changes have happened in two ways. One is an outside force. So like, I'm just sort of going along doing something and someone's like, here's the thing. And I'm like, wait, what? Because I think for me, sometimes the universe is like, you're not paying attention. Okay, we'll bring this in. But the other thing for me is like pretty significant periods of angst and like a lot of epic, dramatic bathroom floor moments of like, I know there's something else. This isn't quite right. What's the next thing? And so I've really learned to pay attention to that feeling of unrest in me, that feeling of angst, because that is usually what guides me to the next thing. So, I mean, it's not a pretty feeling, but it is sort of like a compass for me, angst has been. And then the thing I think I learned from venturing into new territory is I think we're doing the same thing no matter where we are. And I used to have a lot of over identification with like what the actual context was. I teaching at a university? Was I on a set? Was I coaching a client? And now my views on our contributions and our purpose are more expansive. So I really think we're actually sort of doing what we're here to do in the world in whatever context we're in. And so it's helped me to be less obsessive about, oh, I have to be in the perfect place to be doing it. I actually think we kind of can't help our purpose and we can't help the gifts we're here to bring to the world. So that's what I learned is I was like, oh, I'm interested in the same stuff I was interested in as an actor and a director. I'm just doing it over here with a different set of skills and different contexts. That's brought a lot of peace to me as a multifaceted person. Yeah, and Vatsala says curiosity. Yeah, I mean, curiosity drives my life. Like every single point, it's another great antidote, honestly, to the imposter syndrome is like, okay, so this is coming. What's happening here? What's going on? What am I curious about? If we just keep asking, what am I curious about? Because we'll go back again to the stories. Women's curiosity has not been celebrated in society. So every time you pay attention to your curiosity, that's a revolutionary act. And that really has helped me. It's just like, okay, what's this quest? What questions are visiting me?
Any last question, comments, something ideas that you want to add to the conversation? not, we know that we are like a little bit late, but like I saw a lot of comments on the chat, people thanking you, Liz and Karen, for your talks, for your suggestions, and I want to join them to thank you, because it has been an amazing workshop. We learned a lot, and we hope that with all these inputs, now we have to think about that, and we can improve our in the way that we deal, or at least like to understand our imposter syndrome and deal with it in a more efficient way. So thank you very much. Thank you all of you that connected today. We record this event, so if you want to watch it again, to maybe go through all the information that we learned today, so we will post it. And thank you again for joining us, and thank you, Liz and Karen, for your participation.
Thank you so much, everybody. And thank you, Liz and Karen. You guys had such an amazing discussion today. And I really appreciate both of you taking the time out of your schedules to come talk with us today.
My absolute pleasure. And I typed in the chat that I took a lot from everybody sharing their feelings and thoughts too. It's super helpful. Let's continue to be there for our colleagues and friends and ourselves through all the things that we navigate through life.
Thank you so much. It was an honor to get to know you, Karen, and speak with you, and all of you. Like we were talking before the call, a rising tide lifts all the boats. Like you all are the rising tide, and it's really an honor to be in community with you.
I would just add, let's eradicate this, right? And let's unlock the potential that we have within us.
Absolutely. Yeah. And please be in touch. I'd love to know what lands. I'm really open, and I love hearing. It's like, we're going to just keep doing this by talking about it. So please feel free to share your insights.
So bye, everyone.
Thanks again.
Thank you. Take care.